So what a wedge is just think of it like a doorstop. So you put a wedge underneath the door to keep the door open. And that's what you need to do in jiu-jitsu. You need to keep the door open. You need to open the door and then keep it open. And you do so using wedges. So for example, dope mount is a great example. You put your knee between their legs and you point your knee towards them. And then now you have a wedge in place, keeping the door open. And what the door is, or what people should think of the door well, okay, think of the door being closed as people being, as your opponent being elbow to knee. So they're here, they're elbow to knee, the door's closed. And then you can't get on the inside because the door's closed, right? But if you do things like put in wedges, so from dope mount, you're keeping their knee down so they can't bring it to their elbow, then the door is closed, at least that part of the door. But you also need to open up like the upper body too to actually get to progress. So you can put a wedge in place like an underhook, and and then you can actually progress getting your other knee all the way through within the door to get to mount. So yeah, I mean, what can I think? And just in general, okay, you can take an underhook and it can be a grip on a person, which is great. But you can also take an underhook and put your hand on the mat and use it as a wedge. So that's one thing, like there's a difference there. So when you're, well, a great example would be you take an underhook for a arm triangle, right? You crawl your fingers up. Every time you crawl, you're opening the door more and more. And every crawl is like bringing the wedge higher and higher and higher. You can't just lift your arm up and lift their arm up unless you're super strong. You need to make like increments of that wedge. And again, it's opening the door. It's taking their elbow from down to all the way up. Well, now the door's open. Now you can attack, arm triangles, arm bars, everything you want. Like you need to open the door to be able to attack the person.
Yeah, that's a great point because we've like kind of discussed it in our academy before, and the one place that we always talked about is kind of like inside control is to like elevate them a little bit and bring them in closer to you, creating a wedge with like your knee or your shin or something like that underneath them to kind of like make them more uncomfortable, I guess you could say. And so I was like just thinking, I was like, man, dope mount's a great one to insert in the wedge, and so now I was like, where else do I see these wedges? And that underhook is a great way to think about it. I didn't even think about that because I just think of underhook as an underhook, but no, that's a great way of you're wedging underneath the arm to elevate and keep that space open, that inside position open.
Yeah, side control is a great example too that you brought up. Like you bring your knee, like you keep your knee close to them because you don't want them to bring their knee back to the
Hmm.
inside, right? Because what happens when they bring their shin on the inside, their knee on the inside, they're closing the door, right? And well, shit, now the door's closed. You know what I mean? And now it's going to be harder to attack. They're going to get their guard back. So a wedge will stop them from closing the door because the wedge keeps it open. And yeah, underhooks, that's one thing too. Like a lot of times when not always, like you can knee slide with an underhook where you're controlling their body, or you can knee slide where you have your arm, you start your hand on the mat as a wedge. And it just depends on kind of what you're doing. So if it's if you're using it as a wedge, probably you're going to be tripoding with your head on the mat. And if you're controlling their body, probably your head is up, postured up, and then you're knee sliding. But yeah, I mean, what's another? There's so many great examples of wedges, and then it's just like I guess hard to think of them. Okay. So yeah, well, I guess not an example of a wedge, just the door being closed. It's just that knee to elbow. So if you have someone in mounts,
Hmm.
right, and they start bringing their knee to their elbow to escape, they're closing the door. So it can it can work both ways, where the person that's in a bad position, they can understand, I need to close the door. And how do I do that? I need to move. I need to, make an angle. I need to get rid of those wedges. And yeah, it just it makes everything so much easier when you just understand jujitsu rather than thinking of like, these are different techniques. Like, yeah, another good example is just in mounts, right? There's, you can go knee to elbow, like an elbow escape. That's great. Or you can also, hook their leg with your heel, like turn your legs over and hook it. Those are pretty much the same technique, but it's just,
Hmm.
you're just adding something to make it easier. And it depends how high up they are and whatnot. But again, it'd be easier to show with video. But that's just a great example of like a lot of things are the same technique. They're just like small variations. So instead of thinking of it like different techniques, yeah, it just makes it more confusing. Um, yeah, you just think you got to close the door. How am I going to do this? Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between offensive wedges and defensive wedges? Can you think of like a defensive wedge? Because even with like an elbow escape, if you bring your knee in, you're creating a wedge to elevate that leg so you can go back into half guard. Is that more of a defensive or an offensive wedge, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't really thought about
Might be a
that.
video idea.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got to think about that more. Just how to think about it and how to explain it. But just in general, defense usually you want to keep people away from you, and offense you want to keep people close to you. So you can think of it like you want to close the space off, or sorry, you want to yeah you want to take away the space for offense, yeah, and create space for defense. So I guess yeah, that would be a wedge in a sense because it's in the way. I mean, yeah, your frames are kind of a wedge in that sense. Yeah, I got to think about it more. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. We're just going on the fly here. I just as you were saying that, I was like, I wonder because there are a lot of times, there's defensive and offensive aspects of each. So, but like you just mentioned, you got to sit there and actually think about it a little bit more because it's a newer concept that you really started diving into. So, what was
Yeah.
the other one that you said inside position, and what was the third one?
Layers of defense, but
Layer of defense.
yeah, I mean, I guess we'll go over inside position a little more too. So, what inside position is, it's just within the door. So, like, it's the door open, right? So, if you get past someone's knees, they can't push off with anything past their knee. Like, you can't make space with your thigh. Like, that's not going to work, right? So, everything in front of your knee, you can make space with. So that's what you need to think of. Like, you need to always close the door defensively. So a great example would also be turtle, right? So in turtle, your door is like, everything's facing the mat. Like your knees are on the mat, like your elbows are on the mat, or your head's on the mat. And if you let people get inside position, like underneath your like a grip underneath your chin, your armpit, like a seatbelt grip, or let them get a hook in or their knee. Um, well, they've gotten inside that door. So in turtle, you need to keep the door closed. Like you need to keep it shut and don't let them get in there because then they'll have inside position. So yeah, again, that's a problem where people want to collect techniques. So maybe they learn all these different turtle attacks. So they learn the sit, or I guess not attacks. Some are attacks and some are escapes. So maybe they learn the sit through, the knee bar, the Peterson roll, and like what's it called, a Granby roll, and all that stuff's great. Yeah, you should definitely learn it. But if you're letting people get inside that door, you're letting them get inside position, you're not going to be able to get any of those techniques off. It just you're not going to be able to if they have grips on you. So that's what's more important. Understand what's actually priority, and then you don't, and then you can actually use the techniques.